Live tweet. Looking for the live tweet. Finding it. Found it. Retweeting. Boom. It's time to get cosmic. Aleks Svetski, how the hell are you doing it?
Hey, bro. Good to see you again, man.
Good to see you too.
Yep. I'm apparently not here. It's a ghost.
You're an amorphous cloud of energy that's just roaming the world.
Teleporting. This is a live teleportation. I've worked it out.
Teleporting, schooling. Austin Fitz. What's her first name? Caroline. Catherine.
Yeah. I tried.
I think you did a good job. I listened to a lot of it.
Appreciate it.
It was a long one. It was like 2 hours.
Yeah. The thing is, I think she's so stuck in the conspiracy theories and in the belief that somehow whoever Mr. Global is somehow competent. And they're just not. Like,
You think they're incompetent?
Totally.
They're not evil geniuses?
Nah, I don't buy the evil genius thing. I think like everything we see around us is perfectly explainable through a pandemic of incompetence. It's like one dumb thing after another. Like, of course it's going to get deranged.
It's getting pretty deranged, but it seems like people are beginning to win their freedoms back. I'm very optimistic about what's going on in Canada.
Dude, the part of the timeline that I really didn't guess was that Canada was going to like change the
right?
thing. I was like, wait a minute.
You have Steve Barber like, I'm staying. France is about to buy a ticket back. I never thought I'd see the day.
Yeah, literally. It's crazy that the Canadians, the nice people, it's like at the end of it, they're like, you know what? Fuck you.
Well, push comes to shove. They're such a polite people. It's like, hey, I've been nice.
Yeah.
I've been nice to boot all of this, okay? Like, it's time. It's time to push back. Like, we've been civil throughout all of this, and you've just pushed us too far.
It's actually incredible. No, it's, at the beginning, there was a bit of skepticism around it, this and that, but I think particularly the crowdfund just, man.
Talk about
21 Bitcoin as of yesterday, right?
21. Somebody donated five last night. I think the reign of tyrants is over. It was part of the
so that knocked it up to 21, I think.
Yeah, the grip that tyrants have on power is loosening. We're gonna win. Love's gonna win. Love is gonna win the day. That's the thing that's so fucked up. They divide and want everybody like yapping at each other and fighting. And really, we should just be loving each other and like trying to work together.
Well, I mean, to a degree. Like, I think we need to we need to be careful with the love thing, because it's like, under that, it's a very easy thing to say, and then everyone's like, well, the everyone should love each other turns into everyone must love each other very quickly.
No, I don't agree with must.
Yeah, well, that's the problem.
I think you just make the capacity to not get engaged in conflict. You create the threshold at which conflict will be instigated much higher.
Exactly.
And free trade via a free and open source monetary system, I think, would push that bar up way high.
I would never have thought of that.
No?
No.
Why not?
I'm kidding. Well, that's the premise of this whole essay, basically.
Right? Yeah. So we're here to talk about fire, Bitcoin, teleportation. I was reading this, we brought up Francis already, but this was, you wrote this long piece for the Bitcoin Times edition 4. Dropped January 29th, and it was incepted in your mind during a car ride at Bitcoin 2021 with Francis.
Indeed.
Poilette. What were you guys talking about?
So we had just come out of one of those satellite events where there was a bunch of corporate Bitcoiners. I think it was like Mike Belchi and stuff like this. So people that wanted to create Bitcoin S2X, right? And so Francis was kind of like raging, and he's like, these people are fucking stupid, blah, blah, blah. And we were driving with a friend, and she was a noob, and she was like, I don't get it. What's wrong? Blah, blah. And as we do, we were just ranting about Bitcoin, and we were just kind of confirming why this is like the biggest thing that's happened in God knows how long. And Francis just kind of said, he goes, we're going to look back on this thousands of years from now and be like, the first big thing was fire, and then he's like, then it's fucking Bitcoin, and then who knows, teleportation. He just like blurted it out, and it just stuck with me. I was like, And then the next day, or 2 days later, or whatever it was, when I was on stage for the Toxic Bitcoin Maximalist thing with Nico, Nick, Dr. Bitcoin MD, Young Lurk, and who else was there with us? I think that was it. it was such a fucking good panel. I just kind of talked about it on there, and I just like formed up an idea, and I said, man, I've got to write something about this one day. And yeah, just sat there. And I remember the first 2 bits of inspiration I got for this piece. One was when I was in Dominican Republic. I couldn't sleep. Woke up one morning and this just like thing hit me. I was like, what happens when human behavior over time and over generations aligns to what you kind of mentioned? The threshold for plunder is high, and the comparative cost of cooperation is much lower. What actually happens over multiple iterations? And I actually started this essay with the end of the essay, where I talk about like the timeline, BB and AB, so before Bitcoin and after Bitcoin. So I started there, and then there was a book that inspired me quite a bit called Energy and Civilization, which I quote in the thing, by Vaclav Smil. Whoever hasn't read that, read that shit.
Vaclav, read the Century of Natural Gas too. It's a good book as well.
Indeed. I haven't read that, but I'm sure it is. The guy's good. So I read that, and then that kind of started to just form the ideas for me. That this idea of evolution being a function of energy carrying capacity, which is something Brandon and I spoke about recently as well on the pod.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because actually one of the things I wanted to bring up, maybe we just jump right into it, was one of the quotes. I believe it was from Vaclav. In every instance considered, natural selection will so operate as to increase the total mass of organic system, to increase the rate of circulation of matter through the system, and increase the total energy flux through the system, so as long there is present an unutilized residue of matter and available energy. And I think this quote particular that you put in that piece is just very important for a particular point in human history, where it seems that a lot of the people, the incompetent leaders we were describing in the beginning, want us not to utilize all the energy. Like, if we're a system, humanity's a system, Earth's a system, nature's a system, the environment that we live in is a system, we want to be using as much energy as possible. And that seems counterintuitive. Well, it shouldn't be counterintuitive. It should be very intuitive. But for some reason, in our modernity, it has become counterintuitive.
Yeah, there's an important nuance as well. It's the harnessing and utilization of the harnessing and utilization of energy versus the harnessing and wastage of energy. Right, so wasting energy is always stupid.
Yes,
you can't create it out of thin air, right? So it's something that you want to use it for a purpose. But this is where all the lemmings basically and the incompetence and all of that sort of stuff get confused. Is that they look at total energy usage and they say that's bad, but energy usage is actually in line with life, basically. If you want more life, you want more energy usage. If you want less life, you want to cut. So they're like kind of they're like life and energy are aligned, and wanting to use less energy is literally saying you're anti-life, basically. Now, the nuance that I just mentioned, this idea of wastage, I didn't write about a lot of that in this essay. Like, I've written about it in the past, but basically, what's wrong with the world today is we probably, arguably, waste, 99% of the energy. And we're still doing pretty well wasting all this energy, right? So the example that I've used is for you and I to go and buy a coffee around the corner, right? What needs to exist in order for that to occur?
Just did it.
Yeah. So tell me, what's the infrastructure that needs to exist for that to occur?
So we need somebody probably in South America with a farm.
Okay, let me rephrase this. What payments and money infrastructure needs to occur in order for you to pay for it? Let's focus on the financial.
Okay, I went to a POS system. I used my Cash App card with an NFC tap. So you need Cash App to communicate with the merchant's bank. Mm-hmm. They need to settle my credit when it just became buying the coffee. They need to take that away from the debit side of my ledger to the credit side, and then they need to cross-reference that with the merchant's ledger as well and their bank, and there's a communication between my card, the POS system, the merchant's bank, my card, my Cash App account.
So then if we build on top of that, so that requires all of this merchant facility infrastructure, that requires the Visa rails or the MasterCard rails, so it requires all of those. Then it requires all of those businesses. It requires everyone who works for those businesses, all the buildings, all the infrastructure for those. It requires the entire banking system. Then it requires the entire judicial system so it can keep it in check. Then it requires the central banking system. Then it requires the government, then the military industrial complex, just so
I could buy a coffee.
Exactly. Like that's what's required in order to enable a means of cooperation amongst human beings. Like in order for us to store the product of our labor and exchange it. Like that function, that cooperative function is so important that we have built institution upon institution upon institution to hold it together and create complexity in society. And it's necessary because it's the most important thing that humans can do. Because if we can't cooperate, we fall down to what you mentioned earlier, which is plunder.
Yes.
We beat each other over the head to take shit. So we need all of that stuff to do that. And that's just in the US. Then you multiply that by Australia, Europe, Asia, blah, blah, everything else. Like imagine the amount that the quantum of energy that is required just so people can do payments.
Yeah, it's pretty heady when you think about it. It's massive. It's a massive.
And Bitcoin just swaps all of that and it goes like electricity to money and a payment system. Like it's direct. So it bypasses all, like when we think about like Bitcoin removing middlemen, like the real middlemen that it removes is all of that infrastructure, which is really energy. It removes all of that and it's a direct conversion.
Well, listen, you're reminding me of a conversation I had 2 nights ago. I had a friend from back home FaceTime me, and he's a Bitcoiner, and he's trying to convince his older brother about Bitcoin. And his older brother just has older brother syndrome. He's like, my younger brother can't be right.
Yeah, of course.
And so he went into like this long diatribe about how Bitcoin can't work because at the regulatory, at the level of law, like who's going to enforce like ownership of Bitcoin. I tried to explain to him like Bitcoin, the protocol is the judge, the jury, executioner. Like it is enforcing that contract law. And that's very hard for people to comprehend, is that it can be encapsulated within the protocol due to the private public key.
Totally.
Cryptography.
Totally. And I think that's exactly the same kind of person that Catherine, for example, represents, is that she's been so indoctrinated into believing that we need some sort of institutionalization or governance structure in order to enforce contract law and private property. They just can't fathom how private public key cryptography or the Bitcoin network itself can just deliver that without all the waste. Like, and that's the real innovation for Bitcoin for me. It's like, okay, I shouldn't say the real, like one of the big innovations is this elimination of wastage, because credit where credit's due. We were not going to get to Bitcoin without first discovering fiat. It's not like we're going to go from gold and then all of a sudden stumble onto Bitcoin. This is just not how it works. Like this is kind of the progression. And that's one of the things I wanted to make clear in this article is like we're evolving into Bitcoin. And as part of evolving into Bitcoin, we're going to have to live through clown show because we've built institution upon institution upon institution in a bid to try and make cooperation more feasible than plunder. Like, and that's the original intent of all institutions, whether it, going back to the church, whether it's like, Hammurabi's law, whether it's, the Magna Carta, whatever it is, like all of these attempts, like kings, monarchs, etc., have all been attempts at trying to, in some way, shape or form, incentivize cooperation over plunder. But because they've all been institutions run by man, they always end up devolving in the end.
And they're fallible.
Correct. And we go into this whole cycle theory, right? We're always into cycles because the thing always decays. And Bitcoin kind of snaps that. And it does away with all of that excess mess. So coming back to the previous arc that we were discussing around energy and actual energy usage. So first of all, we're wasting all this energy in order to enable human beings on the planet to cooperate, because it's so necessary, because if we can't cooperate, we don't have anything, right? So we waste all this energy. Bitcoin could make that orders of magnitude, and I think multiple orders of magnitude more efficient, first of all. Just do away with all the fucking shit. And all those people who are like bankers and, sales representatives for Amex and Visa and all that, they can go do something useful, like paint or fucking grow some food or something, right? Like,
yes.
So many other things that they could do. They could be engineers. Imagine like the amount of untapped intellectual capital that sits in all of that is just holding together this useless.
It's making VLOOKUPs in Excel to
literally, yeah,
to amend the ledger of Visa, MasterCard, and all this stuff.
Wild. So we've got that, and then the other area of wastage, and this is more about like the Austrian econ idea of screwing up the signal, the pricing signal, screws up decision making, screws up action, screws up value judgment, basically.
It perturbs opportunity cost to a point where the ripple effects are profound across society.
Exactly, and that's why I always I use the meme of we're not solving real problems. Like there's people dying of starvation. We can't feed 7 billion people at all. Like we've got we're fumbling all over the place. But innovation today is I put a digital signature on a JPEG, or I built another dick pic app, or I'm fucking building another trading app on Wall Street. It's like, how is any of this a problem that needs to be solved? Like in comparison to what real problems need to be solved. So it's like we're wasting all resources again into like basically malinvestment, right? Yes. So that's a significant amount of waste. Then you have, not to mention the last 2 years of like this ridiculous scamdemic. Like, I don't know how much you've flown over the last couple of years.
Probably not as much as you, but enough to become so infuriated that I want to tear down the airline industry and build my own.
You buy American Airlines, I'll buy Southwest. 50 million sats, that's my price tag. Seriously, in 10 years, that's my price tag, 50 million sats.
At 1031, we're looking to invest in Bitcoin Airline, so please, somebody go build one.
Giddy up. All right, that's my next project. So the example I was going to use there is like, again, you walk through an airport, all of a sudden, every second chair, every second urinal, every second bathroom, every second thing is taped up with police tape to protect you somehow. But no one stops and asks like, how much resources and energy needed to be used up and ripped out of the ground to build that now we're like enforcing that it's not to be used. It's like, fuck is wrong with you people?
And then on top of that, like how much was used to build that tape that's not allowing you to use that. You're just
on top of it.
You're just compounding it. I was walking back from the playground with my son and a friend earlier this week. And we counted like 3 masks on the ground on the way back. We're like, what the fuck? Like, what is this shit?
Literal pollution. So we've got all of this basically. So coming back to the energy and carrying capacity and everything. We need to not use less energy. We need to use the energy we're harnessing more efficiently. So the focus needs to be not on minimizing energy usage, but minimizing wastage.
Yes.
And that's effectively what Bitcoin does across multiple dimensions. First of all, through eliminating the wastage that is required in order to hold together a monetary and a payment system. Then by giving us sound money so that we make better value judgments and we allocate resources more effectively. Then by removing the power from moronic bureaucrats to dictate what we can and cannot do with our resources, thereby using them more effectively and more efficiently. So it's like across every single dimension, what ends up happening is instead of us wasting 90, 95, 99, I don't know how much energy we're wasting, we actually utilize it. And if any of these guesses of how much wastage we have are in any way accurate, we're feeding 1 billion or 2 billion people roughly, and partially feeding the other 5 billion with that much wastage. Think if we didn't waste that. Dude, like things like world hunger and all that sort of stuff. Like, and I don't mean to sound utopian, that's not the point here. It's like we can solve so much more with that.
I completely agree. Being in the Bitcoin mining industry, you see it, the energy utilization aspect of Bitcoin at a first order effect directly, right? Because you're literally using like waste energy, whether it be wasted natural gas, whether it be excess electricity is being generated and not being used because there's not enough demand for it on the grid. Like that is energy utilization turned into sats, which is productive economic activity that could be that was creates a UTXO that could be it's basically memorialized in the ledger into perpetuity. It could be passed along. Like you take that energy and you memorialize it in a UTXO. It gets passed. You can use that UTXO as an input that creates another, but that energy is being, again, memorialized throughout the ledger for the rest of history, which is a crazy example of utilization and efficiency. That's the first order effect. Second order effect too, like miners think about it like from an economic perspective, from a business perspective, they're driven to be profitable. And they're already thinking like Bitcoin mining is profitable enough if your electricity costs are low, but then there's a lot of heat produced. What the hell can I do with this heat? This heat is energy. I don't want to waste any of it. Like I want to eke out as much revenue as possible. There's revenue outside of the block reward, and it is produced by the heat that these miners produce. Like, okay, let me funnel that into a greenhouse where I can make some things. Maybe I can heat a house. Maybe I can heat a water cooler or a water heater. Replace my water heater with like miner.
Dude, at every level, it drives. So me and Mark Moss just finished writing a book, and I think I mentioned it to you. We were at dinner the other week.
Yeah, you guys did a sprint, right?
We did a sprint, yeah. We did a sprint, and the Uncommunist Manifesto. And in there, it's gonna be hilarious. But in there, we made the point that, so I took some time actually in the beginning of the book to like lay out some definitions, because I thought that was really important to like just say, hey, look, here's some definitions of things. And I basically tried to frame capitalism through the lens of evolution or evolutionary biology, and say that so I defined forcing functions, and in capitalism the forcing function, there's two forcing functions. It's efficacy and efficiency. Like that's what drives you in capitalism, is because the capital is the time, energy, and resources that you have. And what do you want to do if you're actually like an organic capitalist? Is you want to make the most use of that. You don't want to waste it. And again, what is capital? It's time, energy, and resources. So, the most environmentally friendly thing you can do, the most intelligent thing you can do, the most economically viable thing you can do, the most moral thing you can do is to utilize it in the most efficient and effective way possible. And what you're describing there with like miners and the first order effects and the second order, etc., is the forcing function of efficacy and efficiency embodied, right? You're thinking all of a sudden, what else can I do with this that eliminates wastage or minimizes wastage as much as possible? That doesn't exist in the fiat system. In fact, the fiat system is opposite. It's like, if you're Visa or MasterCard or, or the government, let's just use more so the government. It's like your idea is to like create more jobs so that like you fuck up the system and you make it more bureaucratic and more wasteful, and it like you bloat. It's actually the opposite of.
Yeah, and it bleeds into like startup culture too. You can raise a bunch of capital, you have a burn rate, and you have growth at all costs. Like growth, not thinking about efficacy, utilization, efficiency. Right? Totally. It's just like get as big as possible, as quickly as possible, and hope that you can go public and cash out.
Exactly. It's a racket, man. It's such a rat race racket that we need to sort of decondition ourselves from. There was something I wanted to say also about the mining that I kind of lost my train of thought here. It's like the forcing functions. It's the whole ESG narrative and the renewable energy narrative and everything. Like this is one thing that I must commend you for, and I fucking love that you have been one of the few Bitcoiners, at least in my mind, that are quite prominent, that have been like, no, fuck you. We're not moving into your Overton window. Like, I hate when I read these articles of like, oh, but we use renewable energy. It's like, fuck you. To stop moving into their Overton window. Like, that is like literally, it's doing what Joe Rogan did, is like, oh, I'm sorry for blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, Bitcoin, even if every bit of Bitcoin mining was from fucking burning wood, it would still be more efficient than anything the legacy financial system can deliver as a payments and monetary system.
Yes. So
it doesn't matter how wasteful it is, but all of these things like how much renewable or whatever, blah, 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 like they're all nice to haves, and they're all things that if it makes economic sense, will do. But fundamentally, that's not the battlefield of this argument. The battlefield of this argument is like, the elimination of the incredible amount of bureaucratic waste that sits in between the fiat system to enable it to function versus Bitcoin's direct conversion of electricity into money.
Yes. Not only into money, into a ledger that keeps track
Into
of
a
that
ledger,
money.
exactly. Yeah.
And all that. Like, again, thank you for your kind words, but I will never stop fighting the ESG narrative because it is,
Please.
it's communistic. Like, it's literally an attempt. And people are like, it's not communist. It's like, no,
It's worse than communist.
They want to give you a social credit score and dictate. They want to micromanage what you can buy and sell throughout the economy. Like, it's an overtaking of industry in a perverse and it's a sly roundabout way to take over industry. Like Bitcoin's a sly roundabout way to take back the money.
Yeah.
And it's a battle. And Bitcoin miners out there, I will keep hammering you. Stop catering to the ESG freaks. You're like, oh, that's the only way we get capital. It's not true. There are capital providers out there that are pretty based and understand the importance of energy and its tight correlation to human flourishing. So it's a battle, though. It's easy for people to give into that stuff. There's a lot of feels.
Yeah.
People like, and again, like I went on the rant the other day. Like Elizabeth Warren's like, I need information from 6 of the top Bitcoin miners. Like, no, don't. Like, why do you like
What
why?
for? Who are you?
Yeah, exactly. Why do you feel the need to appease this woman?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
That ties into like all sorts of things like, you know, frame and everything else. But it's like, it really is, I think most battles are won and lost well before the battle begins. And what happens before the battle begins is the selection of the field, the battlefield, basically.
Yeah, Sun Tzu, man. Like it's and that's what I worry about. Like Bitcoin miners in America specifically. Bitcoin mining is going to be fine. I just can see a lot of American miners, North American miners, making a lot of strategic mistakes, not understanding that the battlefield they're stepping on and they're going to lose on. Like, it's never going to be good enough for you.
Never. Yeah.
They're never. Nothing you do is ever going to be good enough for these people. They're zealots. They don't care about the environment. They care about controlling you.
Exactly. Thank you. It's like no matter what you do, they're gonna just want more and more and more and more and more and more. There's no appeasing them. Like I mean, how much more evidence does one need? It was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Then it was this. Then it was that. Then it's like, first it was apologize for the N-word. Then it's like apologize for having a podcast. Then it's like every single time you kowtow to these monkeys, the same thing happens.
Yeah. At some point, like it's gonna get to a point where it's laughable, where they know they can just like keep pushing you down a path. You're gonna be like, all right, if you want to keep your Bitcoin mining operation, you have to wear a thong to work every day.
Yeah, exactly.
You get to that point of
It'll be a troll.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, your underwear's too big. You gotta wear a thong.
And I mean, this kind of reminds me once again of, I mean, I always like to quote Ayn Rand's work, but it reminds me of and this is why I also believe that this is a pandemic. I'm not talking about the pandemic in general, but I'm talking about broadly speaking, everything that's wrong in the world is a pandemic of incompetence. Yes. Because you have this desire by basically midwits and brainlets to control the uncontrollable. So that's literally what it is.
Well, it's hilarious because it's incompetence matched with hubris.
Yeah,
which is just like
about as dumb as you can get.
Yes,
it's like literally a bunch of what's the dude that jumped off with the wax wings?
Icarus.
Icarus, yeah. So it's a bunch of Icaruses running around, and because they've basically stumbled into democracy, you know, that kind of model of organization emerged because it gave, like, Frederick Bastiat's work is incredible. Have you read The Law?
Yes.
Dude, it's
short read.
Short read. I recommend everyone, like, and actually it's free on Audible. Like, if you've got an Audible thing, like, you get the 2-hour version, and so it's free there. But it's you know, he talks about, like, the law needs to be limited to one thing and one thing only, which is the preservation of private property. As soon as it's expanded outside of that, what it does is it leaks into the realm of plunder, what we were talking before. And what all democracy did was it just gave everyone some form of legitimization to put, to use their voice to try and extend the law beyond just the preservation of their own private property. So it kind of like put everyone's hand in everyone else's pocket, right?
Yes.
And in that kind of a model, what ends up happening is someone needs to be the representative of the collective voice. And we've transformed society into this basically rule of the competent by the incompetent, basically. And we seem to be, in this never-ending cycle of like rewarding the Icaruses of the world who want to project, like who want to basically transform every complex system into a linear system that they can plug into an Excel spreadsheet and basically say this is it. So the economy is a linear system, push these numbers and then that's the line that you're going to get. The human body, jab it here and there, pump it a couple of drugs and that's what you're going to get. Like society, pop some votes here, do this, and then that's what you're going to get. It's like ESG, same thing. It's like all of these are kind of like this mindless, stupid attempt at controlling everything. And I guess if the definition of evil is the attempt to control the uncontrollable, then I would give them the category of evil. But I actually think they transcend evil. They are just so incredibly stupid that they think that without them there to control it, that somehow everything's going to evaporate,
fall apart.
Yeah.
It's again, it's like the hubris of another kind. And like, how did we get this incompetent? I guess that's the question. Like, nobody can think critically. Nobody can think for themselves. Or I think we can think of ourselves. And even I'm guilty of falling herd mentality in some capacities every once in a while. But like, how have we gotten humanity to a point where very few people are able to critically think? Maybe has humanity been like this for its whole existence?
I don't know. I think it's always a step-by-step thing, man. Like it's the Nazi prison guard argument. Mm-hmm. It's like if you're sort of on this path and then you come to a slight fork in the road, at the point of the fork, the differentiation between behavior is minuscule. It's basically unnoticeable.
It's a light nudging.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden, you take it out a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you're in a completely different destination. And that's when I did in Bitcoin Times Edition 3, actually, I wrote this piece called Utopian Dystopias. And in there, I tried to make the argument that, there is no sort of grand plan by lizards behind a red veil, like to try and control everything. It's like everyone actually has a conspiracy. You and I have a conspiracy. Everyone's got a conspiracy. Everyone's conspiring in some way, shape, or form. And it's impossible for there to be one dominant conspiracy that runs everything. But what happens is that I want to tie this into this idea of entropy, which is the tendency to want to do nothing and get something for free, or the ease of like bringing something down than lifting something up, right? It's easier to destroy than it is to build. So all these sort of tendencies toward entropy exist. And what ends up happening when we take the steps, like when we sort of invert our values and say, okay, comfort's more important than growth, or like safety is more important than freedom, and all this sort of stuff, when those slight value adjustments occur, step by step by step, you start moving down the path of justifying ever more weird behavior in order to maintain an inverted values hierarchy, which is out of line with nature, right? So like in nature, nothing is safe, right?
No.
But we've tried to like create this veneer of safety, and in doing it, we've actually eroded, for example, freedom. Like we've eroded growth because they get pushed down the hierarchy.
And we've arguably made people less safe and more unhealthy. Again, as somebody who's with a son who's about to be 2, another one on the way, but particularly about my son, like, thank God we moved to Texas, and even when the pandemic was in full tilt, lockdowns were in full tilt, and we were in the Northeast, we lived on a small island. We didn't mask ourselves. We didn't mask him, obviously. and he's still. Let me just be like honest with you. He's like a little behind on speech stuff, but there are people like kids 3, like a year older than him, that were forced to wear a mask and were locked down in heavy masked areas that are having legitimate development issues. Like their jaws aren't even forming correctly.
I read that the other day. Yeah.
They can't enunciate. They don't know that they need to put their tongue on the back of their teeth to make the T sound. Like they can't. Their lips are so chapped from the moisture that's created from wearing a mask that they can't bring their lips together to do an M or an N or something like that. Like you think about the compounding negative externalities that come from fucking up child development at that age. Like that's going to have effects a decade, 2 decades from now. Like these kids are set back at the most important time of their development.
Yeah, exactly. It's this is again what I think it actually reinforces the point where it doesn't even need a conspiracy to describe. It's like it's an attempt. Like I meet people all the time who genuinely think like it's the only way you can be safe is you have to do that. Like, I've been to the markets twice here in Texas on a Sunday, and I see people masking up their kids, walking around like in the market. So it's like they're not part of the lizards, behind the curtain, making plans. They're people living in Texas that see everyone else not wearing a mask, but they're still dumb enough to believe that. And it all comes from this like internal desire for, I guess, conforming, for valuing safety more than growth, like for all that sort of stuff. So when you invert all those weird values and you kind of believe, like you've been indoctrinated enough in school to believe that somehow when you can, from an isolationist standpoint, you can change something. Like again, even modern medicine, all this sort of stuff, like, something's wrong with the body, cut it out, or jab it with something, or like give it a pill and like bombard it or something like that. It's like versus a holistic approach to allow the body to rebalance itself. Like it's such a difference in thinking, but we don't know, like we think we fix one problem and we create 100 other problems.
Yeah.
And then the other 100 other problems, we have to find somebody else to blame because it's like, oh, well, it wasn't me, because I was just fixing this problem. So like I had to keep my kid safe, so I put a mask on him. But now my kid's fucking retarded, can't speak, can't, drools all over himself. That's going to create what other problems, like the kid can't fucking speak, he's going to feel inferior to other kids. And like, fucking kid's going to become a serial killer and then they're going to blame it on him. But, you kind of flow it back. It was this dumbass attempt to try and keep your kids safe from something that they were never going to get sick from in the first place. So it's like, these are the ripple effects that I think these linear thinkers just don't think about.
Well, it's even more fucked up. It's like, it wasn't even like, it got to a point where they admitted like, oh no, we know the kids aren't going to get it, but we need to protect the old people. It's like, yeah, so you're going to
sacrifice the young
the young for the old. It's fucking disgusting. And
it's pathetic, bro.
But like people get pissed. Like that's part of the reason I had to move to Texas, because I love my family to death, love my friend group to death, but they're all like, you're crazy, like you're a fucking conspiracy theorist, like, asshole. Like it's like, no, you are fucking up generations of people. You're fucking up the economy. Like look at it right now. Look what's going on. Look at inflation. Mm-hmm. Highest underreported inflation probably by like 3x, and it's still the highest print in 40 years, which is like
they can't take any more out of the bloody equation to like keep it covered up. It's like, shit, what are we going to take out now to like keep the figures good?
I'm getting hopefully this last 2 years and where we are now is like a massive wake-up call. I mean, again, we talked about Canada. Things are happening up there. Like hopefully parents specifically, hopefully you're beginning to realize after 2 years of this, if your kids are behind developmentally, that is enough to like jar you awake. Like, okay, we need to figure something out. Like hopefully the connection a parent has with their child is strong enough to shake people out of this
I hope. The reason I think the clown show is going to go on and probably get worse.
I know. I should never have called a clown world top. I'm sorry, freaks.
Yeah, it's there's two things they've still got up their sleeve, right? The idiots who believe that they can control the uncontrollable. I think there's the debt jubilee and UBI. They're the two big things.
Why are Bitcoiners talking about UBI?
Bro, that made me piss me off the other day, man. Like,
it's literally impossible with Bitcoin. Like, you can't redistribute. You can't force me to sign a private key to redistribute my sats to
anyone.
Yeah, it doesn't. It literally doesn't make sense. So I think the conversation should just be a mute point.
It's another one of those like kowtowing to like a nice sounding thing. It's like, oh, we need UBI. Like, it's
Well, that's the thing. Like, people think we need UBI because everything's so poor. Like we described. Like, imagine if we untap the intellectual capital that's trapped in this energy waste. Like that's what the Luddites thought. The Luddites thought that, like, oh, the factories are here, nobody's gonna be able to work. We like wages are gonna work. Like no, you just unleash like intellectual capital and like the world has ever seen.
Thank you. We are suffering from the greatest pandemic of Ludditism like ever. We all we've done is there was like a couple thousand Luddites in the 1800s. Now there's billions of Luddites. That's all that's happened. And it was kind of like democracy gave them a voice. And now we have a billion of them who somehow have so little faith in the human capacity for, I don't know, feeding yourself if you're hungry, sheltering yourself if you're cold. Like, it's like, humans can't do that. I mean, but they're somehow intelligent enough to vote for someone who can actually do that for them. It's like such a wow.
It's a lot of logical inconsistencies in that line of thinking.
Complete mindlessness. So yeah, it's how do we get onto Luddites?
UBI.
Yeah, UBI. That's right. So it's the same thing. It's like, okay, if we don't give people money, they won't know how to subsist for themselves. But like, notwithstanding like the economic problem of it, like of you start giving away free money. First of all, like who's going to pay for it, and then second of all, like what's going to happen to the base price of goods and services? Like, again, don't fuck with the complex system. But I think the more pernicious problem with UBI, and this is why I think it's fundamentally evil, is if your basic subsistence is dependent on my handout, I fucking own you.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Like, I own you. If your basic income, it's in the words, if your basic income, your capacity to survive, your capacity to feed yourself is completely dependent on my handout, you will do whatever I want you to do.
Yes. And then beyond that, like UBI, people's rationalization for it, but there's just some people just aren't smart. Some people just don't have the will. They can't do it. They don't have the capacity to, like, again, how defeatist is that? Like, how anti-human is
Correct.
that?
That's like spitting on someone,
Right?
So like it's an exact yeah, you know, it's these leftists literally in a single phrase they say, oh, but you know, everyone's good at something, but simultaneously they say some people are not good at anything.
Yeah, everyone's special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're useless.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, we're in the thick of it. We're in the thick of this inflection point where the volatility and the confusion is very high.
And that's why I think it's going to get worse, because as the I think what's happened at the moment is kind of like, picture you're in a spaceship and you know it's just gone through like an asteroid belt, and you know there's like a bunch of damage that's been done, but we're still on, you know, the air systems and everything are still working, but like, you know, the reactor is like breaking down or something like that. So a bunch of damage has been done, and significant damage in the last 2 years. Significant damage. And I think a bunch of things are going to happen in the coming years as shit starts to unravel and collapse, that is going to create such a demand for UBI, for debt jubilees, for all that sort of stuff, that I think we might be kind of in the eye of the storm at the moment.
Damn it.
Yeah.
This is what the eye of the storm looks like?
Yeah.
Thank God I'm in Texas. Thank God I got down here during the eye of the storm.
Dude. I hate to be a doomsday guy, man, but I just can't think of like, to reference the piece again, like I've got a part in there called The Great Transition, where I try and say that, look, we're going to have, like, everything before Bitcoin has been this attempt to use institution and law to maintain some sort of private property right in order to incentivize cooperation and disincentivize plunder, right? So that's basically the entire history of humanity has been an attempt to do that. And considering the tools we've had, we've done an okay job. Like, we're still here, so we've actually done good. But the damage is, or the downside is that every tool that we've had has been quite low fidelity, like, gold's not very useful, blah, 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 blah. So we've had these cycles, and that's fine. After Bitcoin is a very different thing, because you kind of eliminate all the cycles on a post-Bitcoin, but post-hyper-Bitcoinized world, because behavior and value judgments have a consequence and have a cost. There is no way to socialize poor behavior. The feedback loop is almost instant. So all of a sudden, behavior is on a much tighter leash. You can behave like a retard, but all of a sudden you're impoverishing yourself and there's no way to kind of cover it up. So things really look completely different on a post-hyper-Bitcoinized standard. But the part that's going to look different to both is the interregnum, right? The transition phase. And my fear is that the transition is quite ugly, and it's the idea of the night is darkest before the dawn. Right? Mm-hmm. And this is what I think we need to intellectually prepare ourselves for, is that we need to think, first of all, like, and this is what I hope the piece does, is that first of all, I hope it inspires people to think bigger about what Bitcoin means. It's not just a fucking asset that you trade. Like, just because Bitcoin's first 10 or 20 years are going to look like a tradable asset, holy fuck, like, this thing's going to be around for 1,000 years, 10,000 years, whatever it's going to be around. Like, it is so much more important and impactful than just trading it, on fucking Binance. Like,
which you shouldn't be doing.
Which you shouldn't be doing, exactly. So I want people to think bigger about what the impact of basically tying human action and the metaphysical game of the economy we play to reality, like, tying those two together. What implications does that have? But also a warning to help people realize that, hey, the clown show has to get worse before it gets better, because things are fundamentally broken. And I don't know how we avoid that other than being, I guess, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually prepared for it first, and then starting to use that preparedness to structure some sort of communities, etc., to get through the transition phase.
Yes. I want to accelerate it as fast as possible. Like, I agree. Like, things are pretty bad. I'm always like, oh, fuck, how much worse can they get? But, like, if they're going to get worse, all right, let's just get it out. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Like, accelerate. How long do you think the transition takes?
I don't know. So to your point about acceleration, actually. So here's a question. And I battle with this one a lot, is think of it as, if you remember doing calculus or integration, right?
Yes.
So you've got you've got a curve, and you want to have the area of the curve, mm-hmm. right? I think the transition is either going to be short and really deep, or long and kind of more shallow. Mm-hmm. The area is probably going to be similar in the end,
yes.
Like, so the amount of damage, but it's either going to have to take longer and, be more managed. So for example, we build a larger Noah's Ark, right? And more people get on, and etc. And we can minimize the amount of damage, but we just have to bear through another 2, 3, 4 decades of stupidity. or we do the rip the Band-Aid off and it gets really fucking bad, like fucking people stealing each other's shit and killing each other. It's like complete fucking chaos. But we kind of rip the Band-Aid and we climb out of that very quickly, and then we're start moving on another side. So I don't know what's better. It's a tough one.
I don't know either. I mean, the former sounds better.
Like, the long and protracted?
I mean, it's suffering so that less people die seems to be more. Suffering for a longer period of time as an individual so that less people die seems to be, who knows what's virtuous, but it would suck. But then it's like, it's my life. Like, I only have so much time on this earth. Like,
it's really tough, man.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. It's like, what we can't do is we can't fall into the trap of the linear incompetent thinkers who think that there is no trade-off for any decision, right? Like, and I mean, the decision of how long the clown show lasts is not really a decision that we're going to make. It's just something that is going to emerge, like it's an emergent phenomenon. So for us, what we just need to appreciate is that no matter which one happens, or whatever spectrum it ends up on, maybe it's a 10-year transition, maybe it's a 5-year transition, maybe it's a 20-year transition. Each version has its pros and cons. So if it is going to last longer, then we need to basically steel ourselves to. Then it's a endurance run, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a sprint anymore. So we need to steel ourselves, and we need to really spend time steeling our children, because they're going to have to grow up in like peak fucking clown world, and we definitely don't want them to become fucking retarded by the time they've grown up and they're 20-year-olds and they're like, what the fuck's going on? So it's like, we've got a different set of responsibilities if it looks like it's going to last longer. Mm-hmm. If it looks like it's going to be short and sharp, we have a different level of responsibility, and we need to adapt to that more than thinking that we can somehow control or influence to any major degree how shallow and long or deep and sharp it's going to be.
Yeah, just be mentally prepared for all outcomes.
Yeah, and adapt as you go. And I think that is that's where the dimension of the discussion should be, less on what can we do to stop it. It's like, what can you do to, get a heroin junkie off heroin? It's like, get him off the fucking heroin. That's what you got to do. And he's got to go through the withdrawals. Mm-hmm. And it's either going to be like a slow withdrawal, but that has a cost. It's got to be a quick withdrawal. That has a cost.
Yeah. Fuck, we're getting heavy. Let's go back to the piece.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to ask you particularly too, because and again, like, you think bigger, like you just said, what got us here is like, think bigger. Like, don't think about this 10, 20-year period from here forward where Bitcoin just traded as an asset. Like, it is much bigger than that. And you're comparing it to fire, mm-hmm. which obviously affected humanity in ways in which is almost hard to comprehend. Mm-hmm. Many people want to compare Bitcoin to something like the invention of the wheel, the invention of the printing press, the invention of the internet, the steam engine. Mm-hmm. However, you're saying it's much bigger than that in this piece. At least that's, I think, like, it's bigger than the internet. It's bigger than the printing press, more important than the wheel or the steam engine. Mm-hmm. Like, it's fire. It's more fundamental of a change.
Yep. I know it's a big assertion. I mean, look, it's a thought experiment. I don't know how accurate what I'm saying is, and we could argue for decades to say, oh yeah, but what's more important, what's not more important. The reason I think it sits in the realm of a discovery like fire is that it actually, and I mean, you could argue that the printing press and everything changed our behavior and changed how we operate and everything, but it's like, for me, it's like an inflection point. Like, it's an apex discovery, right? So if we look at civilization, and we said this earlier, civilization is a function of harnessing more energy and utilizing more energy, and kind of the more energy we use, the larger civilization kind of like fills that, the quote that you read by Vaclav, like, energy broadens and civilization broadens in line with it. Now, fire and I encourage everyone just go back and read the articles, because in there I kind of discuss how fire is actually, I think, what transformed us into sentient beings. Like we're here because of fire, and how we discovered it and all that sort of stuff, is beyond anyone's ability to identify, decipher, or comprehend. But the argument is that life or evolution experimented with bipedalism, basically, which is a more energy efficient mode of movement. But what cemented bipedalism as a successful experiment was fire. So as we became bipedal, we used less energy. That started to push available energy in the body to the brain, and it gave us use of our hands. And I think there is a strong correlation. I want to do more reading on this. This is an area that I really want to deep dive into. But I think the reason we actually are conscious is because we have hands. I think there's a big relationship between the two. Is because the hands, and think about how this relates also to feedback in economies, is like through the hands we are able to feel, touch, taste, do stuff with the world that no other fucking animal can do. No other animal can do that. So it, I think, drove our ability to, like, it forced our brain to grow in a way that other species were not able to. And that is how we ended up being able to reproduce fire. And then fire then shortened our intestinal tract and then drove more energy into the brain. And then the brain gets to a point where it reaches a critical threshold of interconnected neurons. And then I believe consciousness emerges from that. So that's my working theory at the moment, which I need to validate from some more reading.
Yeah, I mean, your intuition with the hands, or your inclination with the hands leading to, you're literally man with his hands forms nature into an idea that is incepted in his brain, right?
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
It's a deep fucking thought. So encourage people to go down that rabbit hole. So bipedalism, experiment, fire solidifies that experiment. We transform into Homo sapiens. And then the thing that enables us then to really proliferate is the ability to cooperate. Again, and what we discussed earlier. And cooperation, the tool of cooperation is and has always been and will always be money. And the only thing that's changed is the form the money's come in. First we used our memory for money. Then we used drawings on a fucking rock. Then we used rocks. We used all sorts of stuff. And basically, if you look at history, the more, the better the money got, the more complex the cooperation became. The more complex the cooperation became, the more abstracted and functional the civilization became. So it's like you can trace the evolution of money to the evolution of civilization. Simple as that. Now, this is why I think Bitcoin is so much bigger than everything else, is that this entire period of us from like transforming into sentient species who can cooperate to hyper-Bitcoinization is the process of actually reaching peak perfect money. So I'm calling Bitcoin now an apex invention or an apex discovery, because Bitcoin's both an invention and a discovery, right? It is the perfect money. So we've actually finally reached the point where we've either stumbled onto, created, whatever the fuck you want to call it, perfect money, that the metaphysical notion of what money is this ability to store the product of one's labor and exchange it with somebody, maps perfectly, to use Jordan Peterson-esque idea, like the map fits the territory perfectly. Mm-hmm. And it is like it's maximum fidelity. Like there's you can't get more efficient than transforming electricity directly into money in a ledger. You can't get more efficient than moving it at the speed of light. Like it is perfect. Like you can't get a better store of value than a fixed money supply, because this is, again, I'm on a rampage now trying to redefine the term store of value. It's got nothing to do with price. It's even got nothing to do with purchasing power. Store of value has everything to do with knowing my proportion in relationship to the whole.
Yes.
If I have 1/21 millionth, I have a perfect store of value in Bitcoin because I know it's always going to be 1/21 millionth now, in 100 years, in 1,000 years, in a million years. So it's like, it's perfect store of value. It's perfect medium exchange. Medium exchange has nothing to do with transactional throughput. It has everything to do with the ability of the individual to exchange something without the permission or requirement of a third party. Bitcoin is perfect again. No one can stop me from sending you some sats. Perfect there. And the unit of account one, I've thought about this and I've had a recent epiphany on this, is like, people are like, oh yeah, but Bitcoin's not a unit of account yet. And I'm like, it actually is also the perfect unit of account, because we have never known, like if you think about money and all goods, services, products and everything as a ledger, like they're half, money is the other half of everything. We've actually never been able to ascertain how much money there is in order to measure everything else, to account for everything else. So Bitcoin's actually a perfect unit of account, because for the first time in history, we know how much money there is in total.
Yeah.
We can account for everything. So it's a perfect unit of account. The fact that it's divisible adds utility to this unit of account, but the fact that it's fixed makes that incredibly powerful.
It's the most important part, right? And even to those who are like, oh, Bitcoin isn't a unit account yet. Like, number one, like, you're not going to get all this out of the box. And number two, it depends on who you talk to. Like, it's my unit account. Like, my goal is to stack as many sats as possible. And so you weigh the opportunity cost. How many sats does this cost? And is it worth it? Like, should I be stacking sats instead of buying this? And that's my unit of account. Like, where are we here? The sats per dollar price is enough, but it usually is on this clock. It's like, I think in sat streams, like, all right, how, like, right now, I get pleasure knowing that I have miners running somewhere in this country that are, if slush pool finds a block, I get some sats. People are listening to this podcast using podcasting 2.0, streaming sats.
Yeah.
Like,
my only unit of account is, do I have more Bitcoin? Like, if my wealth is growing, I know that my wealth growing is, do I have more sats today than I had yesterday? It's the only measure I can't even think anymore about like a dollar amount. Like I look at my net worth in the amount of sats or Bitcoin I have. So once again, it's very similar to you. That is the unit of account, and it's perfect for me because I know exactly what it is. So anyway, so if civilization can be traced along this theme of discovering better and better and better money in order to make society more complex, in order to make cooperation more functional, Bitcoin's an apex point. We're not going to get better than Bitcoin. So what ends up happening is for me, this is why I think it's just so fundamentally profound. It's like you reach this apex discovery and there's an inflection point beyond this. And Bitcoin's not a little bit better than all the monies that came before it. Bitcoin is a fucking universe better than everything that is anywhere near it. Like it's a, it's kind of like, an asymptote, it's like it's reached that thing and it's there. So for me, that is like, to use Francis Fukuyama's, thing, it's like the end of history. It's like Bitcoin truly is like once we get to cross the hyper-Bitcoinization point, we are at the end of history as we've known it. And we are at a new stage of human evolution.
Yeah, I mean, just think about what we're going to do as a human civilization when you don't have to worry about money, like in terms of like defining it,
managing it, issuing it, and fucking around with it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, what does this lead us to? Teleportation?
Well, that's kind of the meme part of it, is like, I don't know if it's teleportation. So someone else mentioned another one, which was time travel. Wouldn't that be the peak discovery? I'm like, I don't fucking know what comes after Bitcoin. Like at the end of the day, like whatever comes after it comes after it. But the point is that we don't get there without fixing the money and tying the money to some sort of immutable physical law of the universe, which is thermodynamics or time or whatever. Like Bitcoin seems to tie into both of those. And time and thermodynamics seem to be extraordinarily linked as well anyway. So it's like, one could argue that what we perceive as time is actually, the thermodynamic decay. So it's like, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff in there, and Bitcoin seems to be inextricably tied to both of those. in some deep, profound way. So, beyond Bitcoin, and this is why I proposed the new timeline. Like, before Christ and after Christ is a great timeline, because that was a significant point in human history. But I think this is a orders of magnitude more important, because not only does we've reached the apex point of being able to measure cooperation and encode the product of our labor and all that sort of stuff, and now you have you start to minimize wastage, and you put you create feedback, you introduce economic consequence, you create high fidelity amongst pricing signals, you better energy use. So all of these things start to align and start to fix up. Like you unlock the potential of 7 billion people, 10 billion people, 20 billion people as the human population starts to grow. Like, so much profundity starts to move and transform. Private property rights are protected not through bureaucratic institution but through mathematics. Like, all of this stuff starts to shift, and I think we get a level of flourishing that we fundamentally
can't even fathom.
Exactly. We can't even think what that might look like. And I try and make the argument in there that over multiple iterations of that, so generational iterations, I would argue that Bitcoin might even change us at a DNA level, in a way. And this is, again, it's a thought experiment, but if our behavior adapts to the environment, and the environment is poor, our behavior will adapt, in a poor fashion. I think that's what we've sort of had the rise of, particularly in the last 100 years, the rise of the fucking lemming, and the rise of the parasite, is because parasitic behavior seems to be rewarded, or lemming behavior seems to be rewarded.
Yeah, middlemen is a very has been a very lucrative position in society over the last century.
Exactly, middleman, bureaucrat, representative, all that sort of stuff. Like, and it's a leeching function, but on a Bitcoin standard, and this kind of ties into this. I was reading an anthropological book years ago. It was like a decade or two ago, and I remember this one sentence stuck with me, and it's stuck with me ever since. It's this idea of, why are lions majestic in their behavior and humans are not?
I don't know.
Lions have been at the top of the food chain for arguably a million years, more or less, whatever. So they've had actually time to evolve to the point where they're in symbiosis or alignment with their environment. They don't go around fucking eating everything. So they've had time to adapt and evolve into alignment with their position on the food chart. So they're at the top of the in their environment. Humans, barely fucking 100,000 years ago, like 70,000 years, we were somewhere on the bottom half, and we went all the way to the top very, very quickly. And we haven't actually evolved enough to be in alignment with our environment. So we go and fucking eat everything, use up everything, destroy everything, and all this sort of stuff. I would argue that Bitcoin is actually what changes that. And over time, because you can't plunder, and because the incentive is such that cooperation is more profitable and more viable than plunder, your behavior starts to adapt, and take that out generation after generation after generation after generation. I would argue that morality may even bake into us, so that we actually get the future of human beings is a more majestic version of Homo sapiens. So, and this is why I'm like kind of memeing it. I'm calling it Homo Bitcoinicus. Is like,
I love that.
The future of humanity is an individual who, he doesn't have to be told this is what you do. The environment is such that his behavior is far more aligned with natural order, because Bitcoin doesn't impose a new environment or a new law on us. Bitcoin is actually gives us a natural rail to operate within. So Bitcoin is like a swing back to nature. And because this ties into this idea of fusing the metaphysical and the physical, by Bitcoin bringing human action and the means via which we measure action and value and all that sort of stuff in line with the physical laws of nature, it then puts us in a position in which the way we operate, the way we act, the way we do things is more aligned with nature. Therefore, it is more moral, because I would argue the definition of morality is, you know, living in accordance and behaving in accordance with that which is kind of natural, right? So anyway, so I think there's a whole thing there which is post Bitcoin. Like, yes, we've got to get through this transition and all that sort of stuff, which is going to be painful, et cetera, et cetera. But like post that, what humanity transforms into is something completely unfathomable at this point. And I don't think we think about that enough. And when you look at Bitcoin through that lens, all of a sudden, like, fucking Binance seems so irrelevant. Fucking shitcoins seem so irrelevant. NFTs, it's like, are you fucking kidding me, bro? Like,
they're so aesthetically terrible. Number one, like, have better aesthetics, NFT people. And number two, like, so what we're talking about here, like, we're getting cosmic and we're talking big. People think this is too grandiose. You're crazy. You're insane, man.
I know.
I'm never buying Bitcoin. Like, you utopian. Like, but again, if you understand incentives and how, again, forcing functions, it's a forcing function. Like, if you do not work within this incentive framework, which is incentivizing you to cooperate over plunder, then you are going to be worse off. And again, iterations over time, people are going to learn. Generations are going to learn by touching the fire of not cooperating. They're like, all right, it doesn't make sense. Like, to me, it's not grandiose at all. Like, it is actually exactly where we're going. And it's so crazy that, and again, like, we're going through the turbulent time right now at this inflection point. It's just like so frustrating, like the Elizabeth Warrens of the world. Like, you're a parasite. You don't see like the innovation that Bitcoin mining is bringing to the world yet. You want to destroy it before, while it's in the crib, if you will. And it's not in the crib; it's out of the crib. There's no turning back too. That's the other thing. Like, how do we? There's no putting the genie back in the bottle. Bitcoin's here. Like, people are like, "Oh, Bitcoin can still die." I don't think so. Do you think Bitcoin could die at this point?
Nah, it's too late. The problem is, it's like Bitcoin can be impacted. It can be, you know, the price can be hurt and all that sort of stuff, but at this point, Bitcoin will win through a battle of attrition, basically.
Oh yeah.
Bitcoin will just outlast the clown show. That's all that's going to happen. So the clown show, like, kick, scream, do whatever the fuck it wants. The problem is, it's like mathematics is still going to be here tomorrow. So is physics. You know, they can cancel 1 + 1 = 2 as much as they want, but it still equals 2. And it's like, it's still there. Like, it's this thing that just fucking won't go away.
Yeah, I mean, so that's what I'm trying to get. It's like the Catherine Fitzes of the world, the Dave Collins of the world, the whoever that's like, oh, Bitcoin's going to die and the government's going to shut down. Like, no, it's not. Like, you need to realize that sooner rather than later, or you and your progeny are going to get not left behind, but you're going to be worse off than you otherwise would be if you come to this realization quicker. And again, people think we're cocky. They think we're arrogant. They think we're crazy. And it's like, all right, you can believe that. Like, I truly believe this. And if we're wrong, I don't believe we are by any stretch of the imagination. Like, all right, we're wrong, but like, if we're right, we're gonna be much better off than you are. And again, it may sound cocky, it may sound hubristic, but it is the truth. Like, we're the Bitcoiners are essentially aligning around the like truth that has been discovered. And it's just most people on the planet have not discovered this truth yet. Or it's not even that they haven't discovered it; they have an inability or a refusal to recognize it.
Well, this actually ties into probably the last piece we should touch on in the piece, which is the idea of the great filter, right? Yeah. Is that if we're right about Bitcoin, not only do you and I plant the seeds for basically dynasties that may last for millennia, right? Like, genuinely, like, and dynasties that will last for millennia on this planet and potentially be what help us move beyond the planet. Like, I think in the short term, things like, you know, going over, you know, outer space and all that sort of stuff. I'm writing a piece now. It's like a great filter series, but in there I'm calling, you know, this hallucination with Mars and the Moon before we clean our room, I'm calling it the Great Lie. Basically, this idea that we're gonna go to fucking Mars, where there's no oxygen, there's no sun, there's no fucking gravity, and all that sort of stuff, and we're gonna set up shop there.
We're gonna terraform.
Get the fuck out of here, man. We can't feed people in Africa. We're gonna go and do that. Like, it's just mindless, right? So anyway, but at some point we surely will, when we've got probably 100 billion people on the planet that are all fed, that are all wealthy, that are all intelligent, who's forcing like Homo Bitcoinicus is going to take us to fucking Mars, not fucking dumbass Homo sapiens in our current state where we're, got the leaders of the world are Elizabeth Warren and fucking Joe Biden, like, or Elon Musk, fucking, like, I'm sorry, ain't gonna fucking happen. So anyway, so that's one thing. So we're planting seeds, honestly, for dynasties long term, and the progeny of those who didn't plant the seeds like what we're doing are probably gonna spit on their ancestors' graves. So you fucking dumb motherfucker, you could have bought an entire Bitcoin, which is enough to feed our entire line for 1 million years, or 1,000 years or whatever. You could have bought it for $40,000. You didn't? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, it's gonna be a level of like, anyway.
Ancestral regret.
Total ancestral regret. So there's that. But more importantly, it's like, and I think this is the duty component of moving onto Bitcoin, if you have the capacity to do so, is the great filter idea. So, do you want to riff a little bit on the great filter? Like, are you familiar with it, like outside of what I wrote, or?
No.
Okay.
Let's define it, and then let's riff on it. Okay.
So you've heard of the Fermi Paradox?
Yes.
Okay. So Fermi Paradox, for those listening, is the idea that we look out at the universe and there's like, holy fucking shit, there's so many galaxies, there's so many stars. Where are the aliens? So there's enough out there for there to be a mathematically probabilistic, like there should be aliens everywhere basically, but there's none. So there's all sorts of theories to sort of describe why there isn't. And there's a theory came out in the 90s by a guy, I think he's Robin Hanson or something like that. And he says, all right, life has to go through a series of stages, and each of these steps are really important. And if these steps, don't sort of either happen or happen in a particular order, life doesn't get to the point of being spacefaring, etc. And I think the steps are like, off the top of my head, there needs to be a planet in the Goldilocks zone. Life needs to form, single-celled, organisms need to form eukaryotes, I think, into prokaryotes. Then there needs to be a method of sexual reproduction form, so that way you get like genetic diversity, etc. And then, through that, you get to the point. And it's really weird. Physicists seem to like, they go like a couple biological steps, etc., and then they sort of jump into species that is intelligent enough to go spacefaring. And I'm like, okay, there's a whole lot of fucking steps missing here, bro. Like, and I kind of went in there and I was like, okay, well, actually, we need some earlier steps, things like the discovery of fire, like, or at least the bipedal experiment to kind of divert energy to the brain. So then the fire, then getting consciousness. Consciousness has to fucking emerge. Without consciousness, you're not flying any spaceship, Then, in order for complexity to emerge, money has to be discovered. So that kind of needs to happen. And then money enables technological progression. And then once we reach a particular point of technological progression, we need to discover energy money. And I've kind of placed that in there as point 12, I think it is in the article, is like step 12 is the discovery of energy money and the movement onto an energy money standard. And I say this in the sense of like, this is what humans would need to do, and our energy money is Bitcoin, and this is what any other potentially intelligent species would have to go through in order to get through this idea of the great filter. And to explain what the great filter is, it's like, it is a cataclysmic event that wipes out life before it is able to become spacefaring and move beyond its the planet that it inhabited. And for me, I kind of see four risks, and we'll talk about, like, after I define the risks, we'll talk about how like Bitcoin potentially mitigates or manages those risks. But risk number one, and this one exists during the entire evolution of life on a planet, is getting whacked by an asteroid.
Yes.
Right. So, and that one's kind of like a luck of the draw, right? Flip of a coin. Like we could be at the stage of like, we just got sexual reproduction and, things, diversity, and then fucking asteroid hits, wipes it out, start again. Okay. Or we could be at the point, like we could be at Isaac Newton's point, and we just figured out gravity and everything like that. Put a telescope up in the sky and see a fucking big rock.
I mean, and there's argument to be made that it's happened already. Like Göbekli Tepe, civilization. I mean, Graham Hancock, Russell Carlson had done great research on. There was probably an asteroid that hit way North America and caused a great flood. Probably wiped out a somewhat advanced civilization. May not have been as advanced as we are now, but was on the way to climbing
those steps.
Yeah,
totally. So that's kind of like risk number one. Then risk number 2, 3, and 4 are kind of, and these are interesting. These are unique risks because they occur at the same time, I believe, that a civilization discovers energy money. So a civilization needs to be advanced enough to be able to discover Bitcoin or something similar to Bitcoin, but also simultaneously advanced enough to be able to eliminate itself through these 3 factors. Factor number 1 is dystopian fucking gulags. So we're advanced enough to create UBI, dystopian gulags, and basically transform human beings into automatons that, live and subsist through some sort of centrally issued monetary instrument and whose biology is altered through injections or whatever, right? That kind of system will end up dying out anyway, right? Because it can't live on. Like it is antithetical to life. It's sterile, and sterility. What is sterility? It's the removal of living substance.
Virality.
Yeah.
Right?
So
virility, not virality.
So that's kind of one risk, is that we wipe ourselves out through just abolishing the human spirit and abolishing humanity through sterility. Digital panopticon dystopias in the pursuit of a utopia. Risk number 2 is that a bunch of idiots push the red button, fucking blow us all up. And then risk number 3 is kind of the AI risk. And I did a podcast recently with Rob Malka, who you should definitely have on. I'll do an intro for you.
Oh yeah.
He's a young guy. He's fucking incredible story. Like he grew up to 2 parents that were born deaf.
Oh shit.
So, and as a kid, he had to grow up to kind of like bridge the communication gap between the world and his parents, and his 2 parents who came from different countries but both grew up deaf, who spoke different sign languages. So like he had to like mold all, like, fucking wild story, man. So you should definitely have him on. But he wrote a paper recently about how, AI is being built, particularly on the West Coast, and almost being imbued with basically leftist values. Like the values that they're trying to build into AI are things like equality and, whatever else. It's like, and one of the points he made, I remember from our conversation, he said like excellence is nowhere in there. Like there's no forcing function of excellence kind of being promoted, because excellence is almost seen as fascist in, in these worlds. So it's like, do these people understand like the potential damage they can create? Because like human beings, in our DNA is this striving for excellence. And if we somehow, spawn an AI that views excellence as a bad thing, like what happens to excellent humans? Like kind of cuts us all down into equal automatons. Exactly. So anyway, so there's the AI risk, which is, I kind of see 2 is like 1, we imbue it with fucked up values, and then in the process it just fucking eliminates us or turns us into blobs. Or number 2, it actually comes out virtuous in some way, like because AI may just emerge spontaneously, and it looks at us as a bunch of fucking retards, and it's like, okay, let's just clean this off the planet because these fucking idiots are just stupid. So it's like, so we've got these kind of potentially existential risks: the asteroid, the gulags, the red button, and the AI. Now, they could all completely wipe out humanity, and we don't exist anymore. Bitcoin's kind of our way through that, because it starts to, how does it fix the asteroid piece? Well, the asteroid again, it's a bit of luck and timing, but we move on to a Bitcoin standard, we get advanced enough, we get you know, we master energy to the extent that we can build some sort of galactic defense system, and we baseball bat the fucking asteroid.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something a lot of people talk about now. Like, we're again going back to raising the bar of plunder and conflict. Bitcoin standard raises that significantly. More likely to cooperate. You say, all right, let's not fight each other. Let's look up and protect ourselves.
So mitigates that risk. Next risk is the red button risk. This one's a bit tricky. So maybe we'll leave this one to last. So maybe we'll go the gulag risk. We know how it eliminates the gulag risk, right? It's like you remove power from the people who are trying to build utopian gulags, and they can no longer fund the creation of utopian gulags, and as a result, we eliminate large-scale government, and it fractures into more localized government, and localized governments can't do gulags because they need to be economically competitive, and Bitcoin fixes this.
Alternatively, or not even alternatively, but also in that same vein, as we're seeing in Canada right now, they can't prevent you from raising funds to combat the construction of the gulags, which Tallycoin and the Hong Kong HODL are proving right now up in Canada.
Killing it. So we fixed that problem. The AI problem is a tricky one as well. Peter Thiel kind of talks about AI as the collectivist utopian vision of AI can process and decide everything for us, and we just kind of live like the fat blobs in WALL-E, just do that. Versus Bitcoin swings the pendulum of responsibility back into the individual's hands, and we operate and we make decisions, and we actually form the neural net of humanity because we are nodes as individuals making decisions at the edges, right? And I think Bitcoin, I guess my hope in this one is that I think general AI is quite a way away. I think it's still distant, and if we move on to a Bitcoin standard and we kind of, what I discussed, bake morality into us, and we start to operate in a far better way, I think we'll think better about the technologies we're building, and we'll also probably slow it down in the sense that a lot of that stuff at the moment is being funded because of the Cantillon effect distortions, right? So who are the people funding AI? It's fucking China, Google, the US government, basically, and how they're funded through money printing, borrowing, etc. So you fuck that all up, and then all of a sudden, going for these fucking AI moonshots to control the world kind of becomes less profitable because you need to do what actually makes sense today.
Well, and then on top of that, the AI that they're building, right, it scrapes all the public data that it's able to collect due to the nature of the way humans currently interact with trusted third parties. And not only Bitcoiners, but the sovereign computing movement is changing. Like Paul Toy from Sphinx and Stackwork, he talks about this a lot. What you can do with a sovereign computing revolution is you train your own AI. And so that gets us away from the collectivist AI, and we have our individual where we're training our own AI, and they're able to learn individual excellence if it emerges, right? And then you're not forced to do the broad brush AI that Google, Facebook, and whoever are building right now.
Yep. So mitigate that risk. And then the third risk is the red button one. And this one is more about me and Valis were talking about this, and we're like, okay, how do we disincentivize anyone from pushing the red button? And the answer we kind of ended up with is you give anyone who has the ability to push the red button some Bitcoin. And it kind of, them holding Bitcoin might deter the pushing of the red button scenario, because all of a sudden, you realize that there's some generational wealth here. So it's that one's a tricky one, because you can never underestimate the stupidity of a bureaucrat.
Yes. Are you privy to Elaine Al's denuclearization via Bitcoin?
No, I haven't done any reading there.
Yeah, I mean, she wrote this small blog post it had to be like 3 or 4 years ago now at this point. But like, again, how do you disincentivize the red button? Maybe we can take it away by having like a global agreement to denuclearize, and you somehow take the nuclear components of nuclear warheads and put them in small nuclear modular reactors that produce energy instead of bombs, and you prove that you're denuclearizing by rises in hash rate because you're using it to mine Bitcoin.
Fuck, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, this is one of those examples of allowing an economic incentive to encourage individuals to come up with solutions that some sort of one central authority can't come up with. Like, I can't tell you how we're going to how we're going to solve the red button problem and all this sort of stuff, but I can guarantee you that if people are empowered to make decisions and value judgments of their own accord, somewhere in the 7 billion people or 10 billion people we have at that point in time, we're going to fucking figure out some of these solutions, because there is a forcing function towards efficacy and efficiency, and a movement away from an attempt to blanket make decisions on everyone's behalf, which is what got us here in the first place. And that kind of all ties back into maybe other civilizations have been out there, and maybe they even got up to this point of, you know, discovering energy money. Maybe they just didn't fucking get Bitcoin in time, or it was too late, or it failed too early, or the gulags came too soon, or the red button came too soon, or the AI came too soon, or whatever. It's like, and we're right at that fucking point. It's fucking crazy. Like, if we get through this, and Bitcoin's a tool to get through it, like, what's on the other side is like
unfathomable again. And I like the argument too, or the theory that maybe those societies do exist, but they decide not to interact with us until we get past that point.
Fucking thank you. Yes. So that's exactly what I want to write in the third piece of it, is like, that is what I actually believe is the truth, because at that point, like, and this is what I think is, like, you know, I'm a avid sci-fi reader, and, you know, I'm always reading it, and what I'm disheartened in sci-fi, because no one takes into account, you know, the idea of the discovery of something like energy money, and like what actually that does to behavior of the individual, of the sentient species, like, and in our case, human beings. And I think that when we get to that point, and like, so multiple generations and say hundreds of years or thousands of years of like baking morality, what's one of the things that someone who is moral does when they view a complex system? They don't fucking start pushing buttons and like fucking with it. They step away and they allow it to evolve of its own accord. So if there is moral species out there that have progressed through the great filter and are on an energy money standard and are incredibly advanced, I don't think they're gonna fucking rock up here on a spaceship and say, "Hey, how you doing?" and like completely fucking distort things.
Yeah, and then, excuse me, I got a burp. Excuse me. But then you think about it too, like, maybe our sci-fi up to this point is completely wrong. Sci-fi, whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, Signs, any alien encounter movie, it's always a conflict.
Yeah.
Where maybe the truth is, again, keep walking down the theory we were just describing, is like, if you get past the great filter, you only do that because you live in a moral, cooperative society. And
totally, we're just projecting our current conflict version of existence forward, and we're looking at technological advancement without economic advancement.
Yes. It's like, maybe like interaction with aliens will be, if they exist, if the society's gone past the great filter, they're out there refusing to interact with us because they don't want to fuck up the complex system that we have evolving here. Then it just supercharges it, right? If you're like, they're like, "Hey, welcome. You've joined something incredible."
Yep, you've transcended finally.
Yeah,
good job, you made it.
Yeah, and again, we can't even fathom. Like, I can't even. I'm like trying to think, like, what does it look like? I don't know.
So yeah, I hope that anyone reading this, again, don't read it through the lens of, oh, I'm gonna fucking prove him wrong. Like, you know, the printing press was more important than Bitcoin, and so was the internet. It's like, it's not the point. The point is that use this as a thought experiment. Like, what actually happens when this changes, and what happens over iterations of this becoming a standard, and what does that actually fucking mean? And when you start to really think like that, I mean, I hope that it inspires some new sci-fi that is like out of this world. I hope that it inspires some physicists to think about the unification of physics and economics, like, because I think that marriage is incredibly important, and I think Bitcoin literally is the embodiment of the unification of physics and economics. That's like really, really profound. And yeah, I hope it inspires people to think beyond just my gains and
my gains,
and Bitcoin is an asset, and like, I mean, that's why these days I don't listen to any of the stuff from, like, I mean, as much as Greg Fast and all those guys are cool, and talking about Bitcoin and the bonds and all that sort of stuff, cool, bro. Like, I mean, it's probably necessary now.
We're getting past the great filter.
We got something way bigger to do here, bro. It's like, for me, that's what's interesting. It's like that's like, sure, we're gonna 200% per annum. Congratulations.
Bonds are gone.
Yeah, it's like whatever.
Yeah. No, I agree with. I mean, yeah. No, we haven't gotten heady on this podcast like this in quite a while. I'm very happy we are, because that is another thing that's lacking in modern day society is forward thinking like this, like striving for something greater, like having a great hope, like getting past the great filter. Like, it's all, the clown world has forced people, again, fiat money driving that clown world has forced people to think in days, weeks,
totally,
quarters, like, if that.
Immediacy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, like, going back to, like, nail it, like the metaphysical and the physical combining via Bitcoin, conversion of energy to bits that create sats, like that live on this digital ledger. That's the metaverse, really. Like the ledger that is just present, ever present around the world, as people are keeping copies of it on their own nodes. Like, I don't think, again, like we've discussed it on this podcast and the newsletter, a lot of people don't really understand the innovation. So that's probably why it is a discovery on par with fire, because you're melding the physical and digital world.
Yeah.
And yes, the internet's great. Printing press was great, but the connection of these two realms was never created before then.
Yeah.
And that connection will have orders of magnitude more profound effects on humanity than the internet and the printing press did up to this point.
Totally. Yeah.
And they were pretty profound.
Yeah. I think they were like building blocks.
Yeah.
To this, and this is like the sort of, again, I can't think of a better word than just like, it's like an apex point.
Yeah.
It's like it's a gateway, man. Like, that this is, and honestly, as much as, it is lofty to think that we're going to change the timeline to like A, B, and BB. I actually think that's realistic, man.
I do too.
Like there was a time before Bitcoin and time after Bitcoin, and time after Bitcoin is completely different. But we've also, like, the other thing is like more tangible, which is before Bitcoin, like, history was written and could be changed and everything. Like, after Bitcoin, it's like immutable. It's on a fucking blockchain. That's not going to change. So that is a fundamental difference. Like, from everything that's recorded on Bitcoin is never going to fucking change. We actually have a source, and like that's a real like transformation as well. Like,
a source of objective truth to anchor into. Like,
fuck yeah.
Again, I love describing Bitcoin. It's just like this beam of light in the proverbial middle of town that anybody can just like plug into and know that it's pure. We got cosmic.
We did.
Is there anything else we should touch on?
Well, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Do you think, so I've been thinking for a long time to sort of write a book on Bitcoin. Do you think I should extrapolate this topic and kind of turn it into a book where it's kind of like an exploration of all these things, like the printing press, blah, 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 like, so basically from fire to Bitcoin, and kind of look at how all those things transformed us, but basically culminated into Bitcoin, and then do like a thought experiment about what actually behavior might look like and how we might change. So kind of like a full book called Fire Bitcoin Teleportation. Think it's worth it?
Well, if you want to see better sci-fi, who better to write it than you? Be the change you want to see in the world, Mr. Svetski.
Appreciate it. I'll take that as a yes.
Yes. I mean, if not you, then who?
Indeed.
You don't want somebody else writing your vision of a sci-fi future.
Indeed. All right.
Definitely write it. Write in parts, too.
All right. I think I will. I think I want to write one that's more like a non-fiction, but then I've never tried my hand at fiction. So maybe I do two different things here.
I think the world needs better fiction these days, especially.
Fuck yeah. Dude, modern film.
Oh, it's brutal.
Bro, it's the worst thing ever. Like, I'm a movie buff. I used to love movies, and I despise fucking watching movies. I tried to watch, like, there's some new Amazon one, which is like, what's that dude from Guardians of the Galaxy?
Chris
something.
Is it Chris? What the hell is his name?
I can't remember. Anyway, whatever. He's from Guardians of the Galaxy. So he was in some new Amazon movie, and it was like about, going to the future to save the world before the aliens took over or something like that. Anyway, I tried to watch it. It was so fucking cringe. Like, all the heroes in the movie, apart from him, were basically like these butch bitch women trying to be fucking men. Like, so it was like this, there was all of that agenda in there. But then at the end, like the end of it was they managed to slip their whole climate change shit in there, which is the aliens actually came from Siberia, from Russia, and they came out of the ice because we melted the ice caps. I was like, fuck, you gotta be kidding me, bro. Like, just everything is so bad now.
That's what I've watched. One good movie recently. Good Time.
Please tell me.
Good Time. By the brothers who directed Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler. I'm not sure if that's a good movie as well, but Good Time. Again, like, the movies that I like these days are ones that accurately portray the current plight of man. And I think Good Time does a good job of doing that. Robert Pattinson's in it. It'll make you view him in a completely different light, but it's just like a good movie, like a gripping movie. Just like a story of two brothers. And yeah, just the fucked up part of human nature. There's another, I highly recommend anybody watch it. But yeah, like, I agree, like the sci-fi, all the Marvel movies, it's like, it's so
lame, bro. It's
not even only lame, it's just unimaginative. It's just, they're just remaking everything.
I mean, yeah, that's a whole other, I guess it's there's a newsletter that I've been reading from some Bitcoiners in Australia that their newsletter has been great for the last year and a half, 2 years. I've been reading it, and recently they just like popped in some NFTs, and I unsubscribed, and they saw that I unsubscribed, and they emailed me. They're like, as I was writing that, I knew you were going to unsubscribe. Cheers. And for me, like, NFTs just represent basically a manifestation of the peak obliteration of art, right? So, like,
I like my art to be physical.
But it's not even, like, even digital art was beautiful, but now it's just become cheap fucking replicable JPEGs. Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, so that's why we had this discussion with
Untapped. You don't understand, man. You don't understand,
man. It's for the artists, bro.
Community, bro.
They gotta get paid, bro. I don't know, man. It's bad. It's just cheapening everything, and for me, this is like an example of the cheap fiatization and just blind ass commercialization of art. Basically, it's like it's nihilism, because art, I think, represents the spirit of the time, right?
Yeah. Well, and NFTs in their current form are completely indicative of the spirit of their time. Lazy, unimaginative,
boring,
clout chasing.
That's it.
Like,
literally. And for me, I find that abhorrent. Like, it really is something averse. Like, I agreed with a tweet from Novogratz recently. He's like, Ethereum is the currency of culture, and I was like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is the perfect representation of modern culture.
Degenerate culture.
So he finally said something accurate. But anyway, yeah, bro. To wrap this up, I think thank you for having me on. It's been a long time since we've had a chat.
Thank you for coming back on.
Absolutely.
We've got to do it more often.
We do. I would encourage everyone to check out, obviously, the Bitcoin Times, edition 4. There's a whole series of good pieces in there. So Farrington's in there, Peter Sonongi, Craig Warmkeep, but Brandon Quidham's piece in there, Pioneer Species. Have you had a chance to check that one out?
Yeah. It's really
I think
good.
It's my favorite piece from him, and like what I wrote.
Because he gets into Fermi's.
He doesn't get into Fermi Paradox. He talks
gets
more
to
about
like the evolution of.
Exactly. He looks at Bitcoin through an evolutionary biology lens and through ecology.
Yeah.
But our pieces just dovetail in. And what's funny is that we wrote them completely separately.
Mhm.
I hadn't read his, he hadn't read mine. And it's like when we wrote them, we were both just on the same fucking wavelength and they just dovetail in really nicely. So I strongly recommend people check that out. I'm actually looking at printers now. So I'm going to start printing them. And what I'm going to do is I've decided basically the game plan for the Bitcoin Times. It's going to be 21 editions in total. I'll do 1 or 2 a year. So it's going to be like a decade project. And I'm going to print 2,100 of each as a really high quality, thick collectible. So I'm going to print those and they'll be priced in sats. And what I'm thinking of doing is I'm thinking of pricing them in a fixed amount of sats.
From the get-go.
Exactly. So that way they're a fixed amount of sats. So then as the price of Bitcoin goes up, the motherfuckers are going to be more expensive. So people have the option if they want to pre-buy, for example, or something like that. But it's it's a little passion project that I want to do because I think I'd love to over time just document the great minds and I want to do like each edition has like a theme. So the last edition was like Bitcoin and the Promethean idea, like stealing the fire. This one was a new hope, forward sort of thinking. I want to do an energy edition, which I'd love you to do a piece on.
I would love to do one.
I want to do a cypherpunk edition. I want to do a Citadels edition. I want to do a biology edition. So I want to do all sorts of like, real beautiful themes and just beautifully illustrated, beautifully designed, something that people can keep and hold on to, and hopefully that it will also be worth something long term.
Oh yeah, think about our grandchildren going back and reading that shit.
I know, right?
Like, wow. Look what they were talking about.
Exactly, yeah. These people are fucking crazy, but they were right.
Everybody thought they were idiots. They thought they were Ponzi schemers. No, we're just here trying to get through the great filter freaks. And thank you for doing the work you do to like make and push people to think in these ways again, because we're stuck in this short-termism as a society in our degenerate culture. Again, it's all about clout chasing. Like what is going to get me the most clout this week, next week?
Mm-hmm.
What's the hottest pair of shoes? What's the hottest NFT? Like, no, like let's think bigger. Let's think longer term. Let's think about impacting our progeny that are not even like an idea. Like they're not even like my child and soon to be children haven't had kids yet. Like they're not even possible yet.
Mm-hmm.
But let's think about those people that aren't possible yet.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, let's go have a Friday. This is a great way to start the day.
Indeed. Absolutely.
All right.
It'll be a good day. Thank you, bro.
Peace and love, freaks.